Halloween Saturday. Those don't come by very often. I feel so blessed. It's like one of the very simple highlights and joys of this week. And how has your week been? I've been contemplating this dramatic draw between comedy and tragedy and the way that life sometimes really draws out those extremes, and so I thought maybe I'd try to draw some of those extremes out in my own evidence and being for a Halloween Saturday. So once upon a Halloween Saturday, there was a time when I thought that I would be smooth sailing at this point in time, but instead facing down demons, like possibly actual demons. I hear this. So here's a good. Actually, I kind of. This is a. Let's see. Here's a good representation of what I feel like I'm facing. In a book that I've read so many times, I have actually lost track because it's such a good work of fiction. Swan Song. Fictional horrors is a kind of how I started out on reading very long works of fiction when I was much younger, and still like them quite a bit. Maybe that's the problem. Always looking for the shocking and scary and the fictional accounts of all that is odd and weird in the world, and I can hear something at the door now. Who knows what it might be? I can hear the banging around downstairs, somebody trying to get into the building. That was actually kind of the theme last night at about 12:05. Just past midnight. Could hear like somebody down at the front of the building, the apartment building, trying to rip open the front door. Yeah, not kidding. I actually called the apartment manager and said, "What the hell? Like, what kind of security you guys running here? Because, well, you know, criminy." So now whenever I hear like the door banging around downstairs, I go, "Oh shit, man. What kind of weapons I got?" Bit of comedy and tragedy indeed. And so I am casting my spell. Making my potion, which is quite literally a potion. I was grinding up ginger and steeping honey in hot water and add a dash of lemon and a dash of bourbon, and it's pretty good. It's a good autumn season drink. Because who knows what happens on a Halloween Saturday. So cast another spell. That things may be cordoned off, kept safe and well within this space and time of tragic states of mind. Sometimes comedic frames of reference, but only when life is kind. And so I bring these ideas and modes, contemplations, existential pauses, to a room full of people I don't know, to a world precariously balanced, if it's balanced at all. It's just precarious. These moments of what could be, what may be, a presence, a life, a pulse, a breath. And yet still it is a room full of people I don't know. And I wonder, where are the people whom I once did know? Why is it so far? Like, why are these things so far away? No, really, why? Like, why is it that why is that the case? I mean, it does seem like kind of a strange way that we are in the world now. And it just keeps getting weirder. Don't you think? I do. I think it keeps getting weirder. I think it actually keeps pushing us to the edges of our web. There's like this kind of this analogy of that we have like this web, this frame of reference, the things that we understand and know and find intellectually manageable, and then there's an edge. There's an edge to that. And sometimes we get pushed to that edge of what we find. Not even just intellectually manageable, but existentially manageable. What we can wrap our heads around. We get pushed to the edge of what we can wrap our heads around, what we can cope with. And we get to that edge and we say, dear God, hell no. But then we find a way to manage, and we build more of a web. Which I suppose is really an epistemology, an understanding of our knowledge intrinsically, and the edges of that knowledge and how we build out from there so that we can manage existentially, intellectually, emotionally, socially, all of these things that we exist as. So once upon a Halloween Saturday, I find myself grasping at what can prop up that edge long enough so that I could build that web. I can build it out. And we'll see if it works. See if it holds. See if how good I am at a weave. How well can I weave a dream weaver, an orb, caster of spells. How well can you weave? How well do you weave? Who are the people that you know and don't know in your sphere, your elements of existence? Do you reach out to them? Do you ask them the things that you want to know, contemplate, or make those connections so that the webs connect? Seeking to connect those webs, or perhaps not. Perhaps to just disconnect those webs. Just cut them down, man. You can't come onto my web. This isn't mine. A little more of a defensive approach, I reckon. So it is often at the times of hardship and tragedy when we find ourselves laughing at the mundane, the inane. That's what is not even really all that meaningful until you need it to be. Until you need it to be something that is just, at least for that moment, something that is comical and that can make that moment just a little more bearable, because otherwise it just isn't bearable anymore. And that is the tragedy of living at times, is that it becomes so unbearable. And so the comedy, the theater, the dramatic presentation of the whole spectrum between comedy and tragedy, as my cat would like to illustrate. That is what makes us human. That is what affirms our humanity, and it is probably what will get us through this very weird, odd time of strongman politics that is taking a knife to the heart of democracy and all that is actually good. And here is this cat that would like to say hello. Say hello, kitty. Okay. Yes, there you go. I'd like to say hello. Okay, now the other one's sprinting away. There we go. Alright. Okay. White cats. I have white cats, not black cats, so whatever that means for Halloween Saturday. Theatrical enterprise. That's my recommendation. Embrace your theatrical side, because it is in the theater that we can affirm what makes us human, and what makes life so vibrant. We can affirm those things, because you think about it, there's not really many other spaces that you can just be very articulate and expressive emotionally, the whole range of emotions. I mean, I suppose you can do it on the internet, and honestly, because nobody's really gonna stop you, or perhaps you can do it, it's a complete non-anonymity. Say that word, non-anonymity, and but really, think about it. How far does it get you when you express a full range of emotions? Usually, people have a hard time with that. Like, they really just, it's hard for them. But in the theater, it's just what you do. And people will pay money to see that level of emotional expression, because we won't let it happen anywhere else, really. We're so afraid of it. Afraid of the emotional range of being human. What is that? What do you mean that you're college Obama every year? What does that mean? Like, that's just like how you get how you get pinned as a Oh, the topic is, it's Once Upon a Halloween Saturday, so it is just kind of an expression of comedy and tragedy and all of the things in between, and relating that back to theatrical modes of being, and the importance, really, of theatrical expression, and keeping that space, the theater space, something that is alive and well in this weird time that we're in, because it is what affirms our humanity. And Halloween, of course, being like particularly easy time to embrace theatrical modes without too much judgment. You can do some really weird, wacky stuff, very oddball emotional expression, and people really can, I suppose. Or it could be very simple, like, how do you feel? Express it. Just allow yourself to express what that feeling is. Find the words, find the facial expression, find the colors, the noise. Yeah. Or the lightness, like literal lightness of being. Yeah, well, that's the, I guess that's the core meaning of this space is, I'm very grateful that Halloween fell on a Saturday, because that's when I usually do these live streams, so it's just really worked out well for me. But that emotional expression, expression, I mean, it doesn't have to be emotional, but, emotions make it better, is the commanding performance is the, it can be hard to express yourself. It can be hard to find, like, the words or even what you mean. And this is my Halloween, man. Once upon a Halloween Saturday, this is it. And so the core, really the core meaning is, and the opportunity of this moment for me is to really convey that the importance of theatrical expression and to hold those spaces in your life, wherever that is, whatever that means to you, whether it's like an actual theater, studio, or stage space, or it's the online world of these performance spaces where people can live stream, and like people are doing some very creative things now, setting up whole shows that are all like basically online concerts and then patching people in from all over the place. And it's holding space for theatrical expression, like that is really key, and I think it's actually exceptionally key to breaking through fascist regimes. Which is, of course, where we're finding ourselves in these modern times of climate change and strongman politics. And this is my last Saturday broadcast before whatever rodeo shindig circus is about to happen on Tuesday. In the States, of course, because that's where I am. And as this broadcasts onto my Periscope, I'm always curious, like, where does it say that I actually am? Anyone want to contribute? Where does it say I'm actually at? I don't really know exactly. Like, roughly. My neck is part of the world, or I don't know. This is my Halloween. So, Swan Song, just one more time on this one, is this long work of fiction of end times. I forget exactly what happens, why it's end. Oh, it's World War III. And there's a bunch of missiles that get launched. And that's it. Everything's pretty wiped out, except for, of course, the people that survive, because what story? There would be no story if there weren't some people that survived. And Swan is she's the heroine of the story. She's the girl who can bring things back to life. And that's why it's called Swan Song, because it's her, her song is to bring things back to life. But also Swan Song, it means the last song before death. Like, the idea is that swans actually will sing a certain song before they die, and that's why it's called Swan Song, because it's actually a thing, that it's a sound that swans make before they're dying, when they're dying, before they die. So it's their swan song, and so the title, the swan song, is is essentially end times, and apocalyptic fiction, that kind of thing. So yeah. So that's kind of I guess that's kind of what this Halloween Saturday is about in some ways, is this last free broadcast before we find ourselves in an even more like firm grip of a fascist regime, slippery slope on Tuesday. Because the other thing about what I like to do is relate things back to like whether I can see past next Tuesday, which is also like this perfect segue into I am so often feeling so very convoluted because I can't see past next Tuesday, and this is literally one of those times. I mean, how sweet is that? Halloween on a Saturday and I can't see past next Tuesday, which is the name of one of my songs. Because of this weird political climate that we're in. And so it just like all kinds of like poetic little nuances that my tiny little comedies going on in the backdrop, or with the tragedies in the backdrop, the tiny little comedies that dance across the stage, keep me amused, keep me sane, keep me well within my web. Because what else are you gonna do? Keep yourself entertained. The other book that I've been reading, which also helps with sanity and all, is this book, Rust Belt Femme, written by a woman who grew up just outside of Cleveland, Ohio, in the Rust Belt. Pretty great memoir. Memoirs, I find, are very comforting, like reading about other people's experiences in the world, especially as we're so estranged in our lives and modes of being. So that's the latest one I've been reading. I've read kind of gone through a string of them, and we'll continue. And the next one coming up is, well, actually I'm not sure if this is a memoir or not. I actually have no idea, but it's a book by Patti Smith called Year of the Monkey, which I think was released last year. So I will read The Year of the Monkey by Patti Smith in whatever this year is. I'm not even sure what year of the Chinese zodiac this actually is. Yes, well, if we're lucky, or if we're unlucky, I'm not sure. Depends on how you feel about dying of old age. Yeah, it's well, the thing about death is really it's about transformation, and I think that I find myself fortunate that I really do seem to believe in reincarnation. So I find that there's a nice like reassurance. Every so often I'll have this little panic attack, like, well, what if there isn't? Okay. Like, I think that's just like it reassures me as a procrastinator, like, well, reincarnation, shit, like I got all the time in the world. I don't need to do that right now. I can do that next life. Or the one after. That's true. That is a very good point. Governments change and I mean, really everything is, goes through cycles and transforms, and at some point, there will be a pretty massive transformation. And the long haul perspective is that the arc of, what is that? The arc of history curves towards justice or something like that. I'm sorry if I messed up that quote. But, just that the faith that justice will prevail, I think I have a pretty strong faith in that, even though I think it might take several hundred years for some things. But, as I was saying, as someone that believes in reincarnation, like, at least I've got, like, there's like, it relieves the stress of, like, wanting to get a bunch of stuff done in this one lifetime. Like, well, you know, I think I'm just gonna chill out and like enjoy the ride, take my time. Even with like certain like friendships, relationships, I'm like, oh well, you know, I think we're probably good for this lifetime, but just wait till next lifetime. Don't fuck with me then. Not that one, not the one after that either. Give it like at least 5 or 10, maybe even 100, depending on who you are, before you come talking to me again. And then there's other times that I'm just like, wow, like there is such a complexity to our relationships that sometimes like it could take lifetimes for those kinds of like complexities to evolve truly in their full form. And so whether, you know, my belief in reincarnation pans out or not, like it sure is fun to think about. You mean you don't believe that whatever's happening, whatever this charade is that's going on the political stage in the United States and all their little criminal networks you don't think that it's fascist? I think that it is. I mean, I think it's definitely got some like pretty specific fascist characteristics. It is certainly dumb. That's for sure. Certainly very stupid. But, you know, at the same time, there's this scholar on authoritarian governments who's done a lot of work, and her PhD dissertation was on Kazakhstan's government, I think it's Kazakhstan, or Uzbekistan, and she's drawn a lot of parallels actually to this being a pretty authoritarian stream of events. And there was something else about that I was going to say, but I forgot already. Darn. Oh, so it's that to not mistake malevolence for incompetence. So, like, don't give malevolent political leaders, if that's what they are, if you want to call it leaders, I don't know if I would call them a leader, a free pass because they're just being stupid. Like, in fact, they are actually quite malicious. And to give them a free pass because they're, you know, seemingly incompetent is actually their tactic. So don't let that shit slide, man. Oh, let's see, these interesting comments are... Yes, well, yes, people with no vision clinging on to money. They're like, yeah. So, reflections, thoughts on earthbound spirits. Well, it takes a lot of love and courage to be an earthbound spirit. That's what I think. And as someone that believes in reincarnation and had no idea I would be talking about that this evening, I think we make a choice to be an earthbound spirit, and we make a choice to come and be on the earth in the time that we've come to be on the earth. And we've got a reason. Like, there's a reason that we decided to be here now. And there is a purpose to it that we already know. Like, maybe we don't remember it, or maybe it's kind of buried in our subconscious, or it's just kind of buried in our hearts or wherever, you know, but that's part of what it means to be on the earth, is to let that surface, and that takes a lot of love and courage. Especially when there's so much strife and so much pain, the tragedy of being an earthbound spirit. There's so much of it. Yes, it is up to people to see it through, and but you know, part of doing that is to make sure that we're not giving malicious actors a free pass because they're trying to masquerade as just being, like, you know, idiots. They're not. I mean, they are, but they're using that as cover to do some pretty malicious things. So don't let that shit slide, is what I mean. And yeah, well, you know, I think it's you know, it's certainly an act of will and perseverance and determination to see it through and to make sure that that justice does prevail. Like it's certainly not a foregone conclusion. It's something we have to work for real hard and continue to, and like find the ways to connect our webs, and especially when we find ourselves like pushed to the edges of our own webs, and building that out and creating a fabric that we can co-weave, coexist, and find the way to ally and to strengthen each other in that collective action and those collective, you know, just our collective lives and beings. Yes, 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 yes. But when you have a political actor who time and time again tells you and shows you what they are, you should believe that that's what they are, because I mean, because they're not changing. they're like, yep, I'm kind of an asshole, and sorry, I don't like to swear on these. I'm kind of, you know, I don't care, and these are the kinds of things I'm going to do because I don't care, and then they do those things, and you're like, oh, well, then you don't want to be complicit in those things by giving them, like, yes, but that doesn't mean you let them get away with whatever they're doing. And to try to, you know, to keep turning the other cheek, so to speak, would be to become complicit in those acts of wrongdoing, and that is not okay. So yeah, without getting overly heavy or complicated. But I guess this now is yes, it's so hard to have faith. But on this evening of all kinds of spirits, earthbound and otherwise, call them all to action for justice to prevail over time, in the now and in the future, and across space and time. Do you ever think, and I'm going to kind of harken back to a live stream I did a few weeks ago, which is to find myself talking about time travel, but do you ever think about like how history is kind of it's a moving form. It's not just this linear kind of contraption of existence, but or time, as it were. It's not a linear contraption, but this like this moving dynamic, like kind of like it is really malleable to all kinds of modes of being. Hello from Mauritius? Is that? Oh, Mauritius. I think that's how you say it. Hello, Miguel. Thank you for joining. And so take like this is fun. Actually, this is actually one of my fun one of the funnest concepts I like to play with, is at the same time as time travel and reincarnation. And arcs of justice. So like yeah. So like if like history is kind of like this living work in progress, and so with time travel we can kind of like mess with different points in time to always be having a bearing and an influence on the overall arc of history of humankind. And we could, you know, expand that to even more, but let's just stick with humankind's history. And so like we can time travel. Let's just kind of like for instance, if we could. Let's just assume that we can, just for the fun of this thought experiment. We can time travel. We can go. We've like figured out a way to do it, and we can go to these different points in time and have influence and bearing on what's happening with a very specific like intent on outcome for not just future events, but say even kind of like, I don't know, past events. It's going to get like hard to imagine, but that we can reincarnate into a future life and then time travel back. And then I had this whole thing like worked out where it was like time travel into the past. I had this like whole thing. I wrote it down somewhere. I'll have to actually find that now. But this kind of this hybrid approach of influencing the fate of mankind by utilizing both time travel and reincarnation, and like using that as a very strategic approach to how to like implement a whole strategy for action, and to do that not just as one actor, but to have like a whole network of actors who are doing that, which is just fun to think about. So it's just like, it's really just like thought experiment type of thing, and like imagine these different ways of and modes of being in this time and space that we exist in, because do we know the limits of this time and space? Like, we know what we know, and we know some things that we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know, do we? So why not contemplate what we could possibly not know and what that might mean? And what better time than a Halloween Saturday? I never really quite know what I'm going to talk about when I do these things. I just let my mind wander into like very like creative spaces and just try to connect the dots. Someone would have picked up on it by now, and what time frame are they from? Like, maybe they did, maybe they have, like maybe we have picked up on it. But from when? I mean, like, and another fun little thing to throw into that mix is like these senses of deja vu. Like, what is that? What is that exactly? Is that a sense? Is that picking up on that algorithm? Or like when you have a sense of like remembering a dream of the future. I've had those. They're pretty powerful. Like when I suddenly remember a dream I had that was a dream of the future. Or at least I think that's what it was. Those are fun. I mean, those are fun like little moments of what is that knowledge? What is that memory? Like, what is that? Where did that come from? And why is it so specific? I mean, it's like such a fascinating existence that humans have. Like the way that we, like our sensory perception and just the way that we interpret our existence and interpret the things around us and time and space, and how we are a being in this earthen plane, on this earthen plane, and I mean, really, it's quite phenomenal when you really think about it. And like, here I am, this like creature existing in this time and space, knowing all the things that I've known from this life, and cussing out God basically like every other day, even though I don't really think that I believe in God, but I feel like I just need someone to complain to. Or hold accountable. Like, what the hell? What is this? What is this? And then I think, well, like, I could just, like, not have any of those things at all. And just be... just not be. Well, that could be. That could be, like, what are these, like, little moments, like, I'm assuming that you're referring to, like, when I was talking about the dreams of the future. That could, yes, that could certainly be my own mind projecting my own belief, absolutely. Absolutely. But I still want to know what those things are. Like, that, like, sense of, like, knowing, those senses of knowing, when I have those moments of, like, oh, this is a memory, like, this is a memory of a future me. Like, what? What? That's not... certainly not something that's a memory of the past. It's a memory of it's a future memory. That's the best way that I can describe it. And sure, it could be a projection of my own belief. You know, sure, of course, absolutely. But maybe it isn't. And maybe it's something else. And maybe that's actually like a kind of an indicator of something else that we don't know that we don't know. Or that we don't know that we know. I had this really awesome exchange with a psychic years ago. One of my friends talked me into going to this psychic fair, and I was like, okay, that's cool. Let's just go check it out. And I ended up sitting at this table with this woman who did a stone reading. And I think the thing was I wasn't going to spend money on any of the things. And then, like, she talked me into sitting at her table to do this, like, stone reading. And that was the thing that she told me. Well, let's see if I can remember. I mean, it was more than 20 years ago now. But it was, like, such an interesting phrasing that I've always kind of played with the idea ever since. And now I'm not even sure if I can remember exactly what she said, but it was something to the effect of, you know what you know. No, you know that you know what you know. Or something like that. And I thought, gosh, that's so much knowing. Well, the thing is, funny that you say that, because the thing is that I do have a son who's going through some exceptionally hard times that feels like death to us right now. So I am pretty angry. And it would be, like, it certainly helps to, like, at least to the extent believe in a God, just so I can, like, hold somebody accountable for what the hell is this, because this is pretty freaking awful. That is truly the tragedy of our lives right now, is that it feels very close to death. It's not, but it feels very close to it. And it's actually the reality is that we're confronted, I think, with the terminal illness. And so yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's not what you were referencing or thinking about, or like had an idea that it would have any kind of resonance for me. But if you know, I kind of feel like I do feel betrayed by humanity right now, and what my son is going through, and that is a hard thing to reconcile, if it can be. I mean, there's some really hard realities and harsh realities about living and the way that the world is. And so, you know, you find yourself reaching for things that make it bearable. And sometimes simple, lighthearted silliness is the way to go. Because it's so simple and it's pretty, you know, you can just make stuff up, you know, all day long. Keep yourself entertained. That's kind of what I do, really. Is that the idea? I actually, I don't know that I believe in the Christian Bible. I think that there are some very interesting stories in there. But I think, if I remember correctly, that betrayal is a greater sin than murder is in the Bible, I think. I remember some of my early church-going teachings. And I'm not sure that I have anything to say about that, other than it's certainly relevant to some of the thematic content that in a TV series I've been watching, Gotham, which is the story of the Gotham PD and the rise of Jim Gordon before the era of Batman. And I think that's actually a really heavy theme, actually. Betrayal is greater sin than murder in that show. There's some really heavy themes in that show that's what makes it so good. Trust and loyalty and love and courage and all kinds of things. And that's yeah, so that's all I got to say about that, really. Yeah, so I suppose in a way this is a prayer, this night, this space, this time, this essence that I've kind of embraced in this moment and mode of talking to strangers, because I don't really know who you are at all. You may be getting to know me a little if you've been watching this show. I'm a little bit of an oddball, but you can ask your serious question, but it's hard to say if I'll be able to answer it. But so this is, like I was saying, this is like my Saturday night kind of like space of like holding space, holding my theatrical space so that I can hold on to my sense of all that is good and well and theatrical in the world. Oh. That's okay. Where in the UK? I've only been there like once for a couple of weeks, but it was pretty awesome, except for how gray it was. It was really gray. Well, I know, but which part of England? I've been to County Devon, and then we drove up to Manchester, and then we took a trip through Wales. I know, yeah. I wish it wasn't, because I would love to just live there for a while. But I think the grayness would really get to me. I'll probably still do it anyway. But I will have to go at some point, because it'll just be too gray. But I thought it was beautiful, really beautiful countryside, and the sense of deep history in the land is just so comforting. So comforting. And I came back home to the States, and it was just like, oh. Oh yeah. So it's I liked it up there, actually. I liked that sense of like being tucked up into the countryside. And that's actually where we stayed. It was when I was with my son's father. He's from England. He's from Manchester area, or at least part of his life. And so we stayed with his mom there for a couple of weeks in, oh, I forget now the name of the suburb. But yeah, well, you know, I'm kind of the loner where I am too. That's kind of my life lament, is that I've had a lot of time in solitude. Some of it because I want to be, because I actually love it, but also some of it just by virtue of survival, I guess. You have to spend so much time like focused on survival and work and raising kids. So yeah, I guess that's a big reason why I actually do this, is because I don't want to be alone. Would actually like to hang out, so here I am, talking to a bunch of folks I don't really know. But hey, that's cool too. And I don't think I ever got the serious question. Somebody was going to ask me a serious question, but I don't think that well, you can ask the serious question if you like. Yeah. Hey, go back. What's that on the wall? Oh, that is a painting. If you were talking about this, that is one of my paintings. That is kind of a technique style. A style that I find myself repeating quite a lot, and it's very soothing. It's kind of an abstract landscape approach. A little bit kind of ethereal abstract landscapes. I seem to paint a lot of them actually when I'm painting. Yeah, I agree. And I kind of go back and forth between seeking solitude and seeking, I'm kind of both extremes. I very, very introverted and extroverted. Sometimes it just completely clashes, and then I'm just screwed. And other times it just kind of weaves together really well, and then it's awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate that you're here and just chatting, because that's why I'm here, is to hang out, chat, come up with really weird things to talk about, because it's also like me just coming up with things to talk about. That's the other thing that's kind of strange about live streaming, is you create this space where you are the show, but then you're also engaging with folks in these chat boxes and building a conversation out that way. It's kind of clever little art form. It's also one that you have to learn how to finesse. So I have been doing that, trying to anyway. I think I'm getting better. But, So, what are the highlights of your, I guess, is Halloween a thing in England? I can't remember. Why do I not really know the history of Halloween? I guess that's kind of the influence of, yeah. That's what I thought, actually. It's, I'm thinking about oh, it's kind of got a pretty deep history, and so what I was going to say is that's the unfortunate influence of American shock and awe capitalism, is that you it shocks and awes you out of remembering the actual history of things, and it turns it into its own little oh, what is that word? Commodity fetish kind of thing. So, yeah, that makes sense. Of course it did. It commodified it. It's what we do. I'm hoping to, like, at some point I can just travel quite a lot, really, and just live in a bunch of different places around the world for, 6, 12, 24 months at a time. No, 6, 12, 18, 24 months at a time. Longer if I really like the place. And really just experience the culturalness of the world. Culturalness is not a word. I make words up, though. And let that be how I spend, like, the rest of my days, because I've lived in the same place now for all of my years on this earth. Not the same house, not the same city, but, like, basically the same watershed, or, like, pretty close to it, like the same like patches of watersheds. This can't go on. This can't go on. It's gotta end at some point. They gotta, like, break up this whole, like, monopoly that this region has had on my life and just travel around. And last year I finally got yeah, I'm sure the internet, like, when you get on, yeah, I mean, God, there's so much you can find. So last year I decided that it was going to be the year that I finally get some bartending experience and actually, like, tend bar and get some knowledge in my belt about how to, like, actually make some decent cocktails and have fun doing it, because it can be a lot of fun. And the other idea with that, though, is that you can as a bartender, you can go anywhere. Like, you can travel and earn money. Like, you can go anywhere and for 6 months at a time, like, just work as a bartender and then take off for the next place. Like, it is, like, a very viable mode of sustaining a nomadic lifestyle. And then, after years and years of not making any progress on that goal, I finally make progress on that goal, and then bam, pandemic, like, shuts down all the bars. Like, what the hell? Like, no. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Me too. Yeah, like, that's so it is yeah, well, it's just because it's just so fascinating to talk to folks that are from other places and have completely different life experiences and a different sense of life and living and being. And myself being from basically, like, a bunch of small towns and never having really lived in a big city, like, I'm so hungry for a big city. And New York City, I think, will be the first one that I live in. And then of course, assuming that I can get out of New York City once I've lived there. It would be nice to spend some time in London and Paris, and of course those are all, like, very expensive cities, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah. Exactly. Like, so many stories. So many stories. It's just really such a fascinating place. Like, the whole place, like, really. I mean, like, and not just, like, the stories from I'm from the Detroit metro region in the USA, and that's where my family's been from for a few generations, and so that's, like, the fabric of my existence at this point. And I am really eager to go experience other parts of the world, but not just, like, the cities that are nice and established, like, of course those, but also, like, like, all kinds of places and stuff that's rougher and a bit more, like, conflict and war-torn, and probably not too much so, but like I want to see firsthand what people are going through and experiencing, and really understand what it is to be from the earth, from this world that we've created, and be able to advocate more effectively for peace and justice, and to build a better world, and to do that with, you know, a more intimate knowledge of what people are actually experiencing. And so one of the jobs that I have is to help an organization collect donated instruments, musical instruments, and then find new homes for those instruments. And so one of the people that I talked to this week was a woman who's helping folks in a refugee shelter on the Texas-Mexico border, on the Mexican side, and they asked for a keyboard for their, yeah, it is risky, so it'll probably, like, not right now, probably a little later, but this woman put in a request for an electric, you know, a keyboard, so that the music, there is actually a social worker there who's musically trained and who can not only play piano for the refugees in the shelter, but, you know, could probably, you know, teach some kids how to play. And I just thought, my God, like, what a tremendous impact that one musical instrument is going to have on so many people who need something good and life-affirming in their world. And I'm just this person on the phone right now who can make that happen. And it's like such a unexpected sense of well-being and being able to do something powerful that has a really good impact that I just wasn't expecting. Like, I wasn't expecting that moment, and I just, like, suddenly realized, like, oh, like, I just need to shepherd this particular request up to the top and make sure that it happens and that we get this keyboard shipped as soon as possible. And but it also made me think more carefully about what that shelter must be like for those people, and what they're going through and what they're experiencing. And after all the things that have been going on with the US-Mexico border over the last few years, like, I feel really blessed that I have this chance to make a difference, and a good one. Even if it's, you know, kind of a drop in the bucket. But that's the whole point of music and musical instruments, and having, you know, like, sharing access to those musical instruments, is that it matters. It matters a lot. Just like holding theatrical space, it's the same kind of thing. Like, holding theatrical space to do performance and art, but also music, and to share those things in the world, is very life-affirming. And that's what we need. That's what we need more of all the time, and all the spaces that we can create, and to hold that space. And so that is why I do this, or at least partly why I do this. And I will feel very, very, what is the word? Like, I have fulfilled just a little bit more of my purpose in this earth, and this life that I'm in now, when I hear that keyboard has been received, and that is working wonderfully for that music instructor, and so many people are, you know, feeling healed by it. Like, that will be a moment that I know that I've come to do a little bit more of what I've come to do. And so even when I get overwhelmed and frustrated with moving instruments all across the United States from point A to point B, in this weird, like, chaotic fashion that we do things, because it gets logistically overwhelming at times, and really, like, grr. Those are the moments I'm like, oh yeah, like, this is why I want to keep doing this. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. That's true. I mean, well, I guess that's kind of why I want to do that traveling and going out in the world, is to really experience, at least like experience it more straightforwardly what other people are experiencing, or at least like, be more immersed in what people are experiencing. Whether it will never, be exactly what people are experiencing, because I'm not them, but it'll be more of an intimate knowledge. And that's really what drives me, is I really have a strong desire for intimate knowledge of any topic like that I want knowledge about. Like, I really dive into the thing, whatever that is, and then I'm not done until I know quite a lot. I do the same thing with certain artists, musicians, authors. Like, I'll read a lot of a certain person's work, or I listen to a whole, collection of a musician's repertoire, or a whole like genre of things, or, although it's kind of hard to do a whole genre because there's just so much. But to really, just kind of immerse into a body of knowledge, it's very satisfying to do. And so, sociology of performance. There was a time where I contemplated doing a PhD, and maybe I still will, in like sociology of theater, and kind of like, but equally a sociology of theater as much as performance art and theater. So it's not one more than the other, but an equal kind of approach. And I found like a whole journal devoted to that type of practice and approach to a line of like inquiry and professionalism. And I was just like, oh my God, that's what I am. Like, that's what I do, whether I want to or not. Like, that's just what I do. And it would be nice to hone the craft. So I guess that's, really at the heart of what all this is too. It's like this experiment in like theatrical performance, or theatrical, like, or embracing theatrical space, but also kind of like the sociological implications of trying to embrace this kind of theatrical space in this kind of way, in this mode, and have it be meaningful. Because as silly and flippant as I try to be sometimes, it's just, I'm really always searching for meaning, which my night would not be complete without referencing another piece of literature, which would be Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, because that's a pretty important piece of work, which I have a copy of here, around here somewhere. I have a lot of books, and I tend to read 8 or 9 at a time, some of them much slower than others, and I've made it a goal to finish 10 of them this year, which I'm now running out of time. So, well, in what way searching for meaning? Well, that what I do offers some sense of humanity, life-affirming humanity, humanizes the moment or the day. And even if it's just by, accident, like what it is that I'm doing is like gives this moment in time a little bit more of a humanizing effect, life-affirming in the way that it is either serious or not serious, and in that way is meaningful. And maybe because it creates a spark of joy or happiness or sense of well-being, and just a simple sense of well-being, then it has meaning. And I think that it's, yeah, I mean, yeah, a contribution to humanity. Always like, yeah, I think that's really as much as I'm like, God, should I just give it a rest already? Like, nope, that's what I'm always trying to do. It's like, do like some kind of like meaningful contribution to humanity. Even in my silliness, it's just like, oh, yeah, yep. Oh, look, waxing poetic on contributions to humanity. Once again, yeah. So I'm gonna have to draw on some sort of non sequitur. So, but of course, a piece of literature. I'm sure I'll find a way to relate it back to life-affirming humanity, because that's what I do. So let's see. That will be the challenge. How do I do that? So here is this. This is the other book that I bought recently, and I've just kind of dipped my toe into the Whiskey Rebellion, the Rebirth of Rye, which is a story of how rye whiskey was actually the first whiskey in America, and then bourbon kind of like oh, thank you. That's a nice. That's a lovely thing to say. So you are history too. That's a cool. You should write that down. That's not only a cool thing to say to somebody, like that's a good line. You should write that down. So rye whiskey. Oh, so like here's the okay, so like this, so the intersection actually between this book, Rust Belt Femme, and this book, which is the book on rye whiskey, which I just like read, I think like either the first chapter or introduction, just like barely started it. But the connection was in the first book, which I'm halfway through, the Rust Belt Femme, she talks about how where she lived outside the suburb of Cleveland was the history of this creek. And oh yeah, oh gosh, I'm sorry. So that is painful. That's not something I wish upon anyone, because as someone that loves to read, I can't even imagine that. So I'm really sorry that that's the case. So I hope that maybe I can share a bit of my own literature that I've read, and this piece of history was the people that dug the Erie Canal. The work was so hard that people didn't really have much to look forward to. Like they worked in like long days, because it was such a long time ago that they, that people were digging out a canal, and by hand basically, and so what they looked forward to was good whiskey, and not only getting paid, their monies for the day, but getting paid in good whiskey. And so like the quality of the whiskey was a big deal. And so that was what drove people to actually like do the work and to dig the canals, that they could actually at the end of the day get drunk on good whiskey because that's really all they had to look forward to. And so like that was part of the Rust Belt Femme book, and her telling her memoir where she was from. And then this book was the Rebirth of Rye, so it goes back into the history of whiskey and like how people were building their own stills in their own like backyards to make whiskey, and how there's just this really like economic fight over being able to make your own whiskey, and so it really played out in the economy of that whole region. And so to relate it all the way back to me kind of indulging myself in making cocktails this last year, and actually like teaching myself how to make some basic drinks, but also just kind of innovating and making some interesting things, and tasting a lot of different whiskeys along the way, and craft distillery, like craft distillery whiskeys, not just like all the usual ones. And because it's, it's part of it's part of what drives a local economy. And so so having some like knowledge of the history of whiskey and from whatever region that you're in is neat. Like, it's a really interesting way to engage people in a conversation about what they're drinking, but also about the economy, like that we're, if in the moment supporting a local craft distiller, like that's a pretty cool thing to do, and it helps them, and it helps them contribute back to their community. And so of all the spirits, there's kind of like its own, each spirit has its own story. Like rum has its own story, whiskey has its own story, gin and vodka and tequila, like they all kind of have their own story of how they've come to be and how they've come to be made well. And there's a lot bound up in those stories that are pretty political, historical narratives. And so so it's kind of fun to entertain myself with something as simple as making a cocktail, but then also kind of going back into the history of either that cocktail or that particular spirit, and what it means to a region or to a people. So yeah, or the fact that English whiskey is spelled Whisky and American whiskey is spelled with an E. And sometimes I'll like throw the English spelling out there from time to time, and or the British English spelling, as it were, and people will be like, "Oh, that's spelled wrong." I'm like, "No, it isn't." And like I'll go through this little kind of phase of like when I craft a written social media post, I'll try to do it in British English and like keep the conventions as well as I can to just make it so that I like keep that in my knowledge bank somewhere. And that was actually the last time I did that. I spelled whiskey with the British spelling, and someone was like, "Oh, that's spelled wrong." I'm like, "No, it isn't. Like, if you looked at the other words in the paragraph, like, you would know." And then I thought, how come I don't actually have any? Like, I should get some. So that's my whiskey story for the evening. And I seem to be getting more and more of them piled up, whiskey stories, which is and so the other kind of the latest installment of my cocktail making and whiskey knowledge repertoire is that Cleveland has, so Cleveland's like the theme, Cleveland whiskey, which is just, that's what it's called, Cleveland whiskey, and they have their distillery there in Cleveland, and they make a pretty decent whiskey. And so now when I go to the store to get whiskey, I'm like I can't get the same thing. Like, I have to try something new like almost every single time, which is kind of annoying. Because once you find something that's good, you kind of like just want to stick with it, and or at least like know that you can go back to it. And oh really? I don't know that I found a Canadian whiskey that I like as a go-to. But I should actually try some. But so I decided to go with one that I've already had. So I kind of like gave in. I'm like, okay, well, Fireball whiskey. I have not had that in a very, very long time. I should actually experiment a little bit more with that one. But I gave in. I got a whiskey that I'd already gotten, which was the Cleveland whiskey. But then I got it home and I looked at the bottle. I'm like, oh, like this is actually a special batch. So it was like even better. It was like, not only did I get one that I know that I'll like, but it's a different variation of one that I like. So it's like, I get to have a Cleveland whiskey, and it's a new one I haven't tried yet. So I actually did hit both my boxes of one that I like, and it's a new thing. So win-win. That was pretty cool. which now I have like this whole process where I like to do, like, experiment with doing cocktail photography. And so the best way, of course, to do cocktail photography is with a freshly opened bottle. So now, like, that's what will always cause the delay before I open a bottle of anything, is like, oh, but am I ready to like do the whole photo shoot? Like, no? Alright, fine. I'll wait. And then that's my motivation to actually like do the photo shoot, is like that I actually want to drink the whiskey or drink whatever it is. So now that it's getting colder, I was using this, I had kind of like this space set up on my balcony that I could do with a nice like brick background and the table out there, which turned out really well. But now that it's getting colder, it's not as motivated to go out and do even a 20-minute photo shoot of cocktails on my cold balcony. So I've got to create a new space in my kitchen, and my kitchen's pretty messy, so that's going to be interesting. So I suppose I could like work the mess into the background in a way that makes it interesting. Because hey, why not, you know? And people will be like, oh yeah, my kitchen's messy too. I totally relate. Yeah, well, what I discovered is bourbon is really good warm. And there are a lot of recipes out there for like bourbon, hot bourbon cider, the apple cider with bourbon, and I haven't actually made that quite yet. I actually did, my variation was to do, like at first I warmed up some, like I melted honey into some water and just like kind of like warmed it up on the stove, and raw night, like a good raw honey, local raw honey, of course, and then let that dissolve and heat up, and then I added a little bit of bourbon, and then I just like heated, like actually like cooked it, and then I mean, not like boiling, but just like warmed it up essentially, and then poured that into a glass, and then added a little bit of like a splash of lemon. I think that was it. And it took me a minute to get the ratio right, but it's really good. It's like, it's really good, and it's really soothing, and I think that part of what drove me to do that is I found that it helps relieve the stress of having a cough, is to drink a bit of warm bourbon. So that's been one of my new recipes, I guess, that I've been working on. Yeah, White Russians. I'm not sure if I've actually had a Black Russian drink, but a White Russian I've had, and those are really good, and they're also very strong, and that's what I remember most about them, is that you have to be very careful not to drink them too quickly, because they taste really good, and it's really easy to drink it too fast, so just take your sweet time. But I have not ventured into making those yet. I will, eventually. Because now the idea is that, well, maybe I won't ever actually, well, you know, hopefully at some point it'll be, I mean, there's people out there running bars in this middle of this pandemic, which I can't even imagine working in that environment. At some point, I hope that it'll get safe again to take on such a job, and at least out of my like allowable things that I will do for that as my own person, and I can have a good time doing it and have built up like a decent amount of recipes as I've been just experimenting at home, to have like my own kind of signature drinks. Oh, well, you should, yeah, you could tell me something slightly interesting. It might be more interesting than you think. This, at this point, is not warm anymore. It's just cool. Oh, that is so cool. I actually love that you do that, because that has been the biggest thing for me this year, is to realize that I do not have any glasses. I'm like, I can't do photography without like a decent set of glasses, and so I've been building up a collection, very small collection, but like I realized that you can't like always use like mason jars for drinks. Yeah, that is a really cool thing to do. It's like, and it's so fun to drink out of fancy glasses. Like it's like such a simple joy to drink out of fancy glasses. And so I've been trying to like build up a nice, reliable collection of things that are a bit more photogenic than what I started with. And I luckily like kind of swooped up a few props before the pandemic hit, so I had some things to work with and start to like innovate on what else I need to add to the collection of props. And then I just recently added a few more glasses to the mix. So that's actually like, that's a super cool, that's like, to me, that's like super interesting, and now I actually kind of want to see them. So I guess in some respects I'm kind of a dork, really. Which I fully not only accept but embrace, revel in it, really. And but the other thing that I've noticed that I have collected and just kind of didn't appreciate until I was starting to, yeah, I mean, really, people do some amazing glass work, like really quite incredible. And that's when I was like, oh, like I have all these, like this is a candle holder, which you can't quite see the design, but you can kind of see, like there's some intricacies there that I've just kind of had tucked away, not using it, I haven't used it in probably a couple of years. I'm like, oh, this is beautiful. Like, why am I not using these things? Or like this one, which is just this nice little, like, goblet type candle holder that is just like simple elegance, and we should let ourselves use simple elegance in our daily lives because it's so lovely. And people put a lot of work into creating well-made glass items. I mean, obviously some of those are, going to be mass-produced, but like there are people that make glass artwork, and it's really phenomenal. And just like with carved, like wood, carved wood and like craftsmanship with like wood carvings and stuff like that also is pretty cool. So I kind of have an affinity for really well-made like woodcraft and glasscraft, because there's just such beautiful designs, and it's just like such a beautiful way to capture design and bring it to life as a work of art. And so, yeah, glassware, totally an underappreciated art, I think, in general. So, it appears that I have hit a Saturday night stride. I usually don't stream for this long. So thank you for making it more of an inventive piece of performance, I guess. Chat, conversation, whatever this is. Once upon a Halloween Saturday. I mean, I'm still just so pleased that Halloween fell on a Saturday night. It's like there's just like these little butterfly kisses that the universe will give me. This is one of them. And then also like the election is on Tuesday, which I can reference it as not really being able to see past next Tuesday. And I would play that song, but perhaps what I can instead do is say, as a spoken word, I am so very convoluted. Why don't you tell it to me so? Aw. Yeah, I know, right? Like, why is that so hard? Why? I mean, really? Like, why is it so hard to get a decent conversation? It should not be this hard. Because we walk through shades of darkness, searching for stories that we know. won't you tell it to me softly? Given my foreshortened sense of fate, you know I can't see past next Tuesday. So maybe this should wait. It's like a half spoken word, half a cappella version of Past Next Tuesday, which is good. It's good for me. Good little theatrical, little artistic exercises. Yeah, I mean, I remember like one of the last decent conversations I had at the bar that I worked at for a brief moment in time was with this person who I think either like still was or was formerly a mail delivery person, and it was such a good conversation, and like we were both so pleasantly surprised at like what a like pleasantly great conversation it was. And it was, and you know, like we didn't expect to ever see each other again, which I love conversations that are like with perfectly total strangers that are just pleasant and it's a lovely exchange, and then you like go about your merry ways. It's one of the things I love about New York is you can do that like all day long. And it was just like, wow, like why is it so infrequent to have like such a pleasantly, not just a pleasant conversation, but a really good one. Like why is that so hard? Like why is that hard to come by? Yeah, me too. Yep. Creative theater types, which is like cool when you realize that about yourself, and then you can like start to seek that out. And I've also found that that can be a pretty sensitive like type of person, and so like when you find a group of folks that you can really hang with that are the creative theatrical type, like that's really special. Like, that is something to really hold on to. And I think that's what I'm still looking for in life, what I'm still searching for, that one of those meaningful things is to really build out that theatrical community for myself and find more folks who value that creative theatrical space and that decent conversational space, whether it's, you know, performance art or just in general like regular conversation, and really build on that as a life, as a lifestyle, as a daily mode, because it's just so lovely, and it's nice to just have creative things to talk about. You have creative works in progress to talk about, like whatever you're working on or that person's working on, or like how it kind of like all comes together as a whole. Well, you know, you would think I have a few folks that are in that kind of inner circle of mine, but like to have a really like a broader network of folks, it's still a work in progress. And largely what's made it difficult for me to build that community for myself is that I'm a single mom, and I've been a single parent for a good like 15 years. And there's a lot of work that comes along with that. There's not a lot of time left over at the end of the day to invest in my own like social networks and just social anything really, like socializing. And so there's a lot still for me to cultivate, and now I've, you know, kind of found myself having contradictory space and time to create and cultivate that network of folks and that community for myself. with my kids being teenagers and becoming more independent, but then also still needing me in a lot of ways that I didn't realize, and yet still finding myself with more time on my hands. But now, of course, we've got these like weird pandemic conditions, socializing a little bit different than what I thought it was going to be at this point in the game. So here we are. That's how this whole series came to be, my Saturday night live streams. Which have been pretty consistent this last month, actually. I'm kind of surprised how consistent I've been able to keep it. So, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, you know, I often feel like I'm not either, and it's really, you know, it's really like an act of courage to just kind of like delve into some facet of like what is interesting to you, whether it's, you know, philosophical or literature or an idea or anything that like really interests you, so you have something to say about it, and starting a conversation from that vantage point of something that you know, find remarkable about a performance or find remarkable about a piece of work, whatever it is. And just being willing to take that step of initiating a sincere conversation. And I think that's what it has always been, kind of what has encouraged me to take that kind of, you know, careful step of like inviting a conversation with someone I don't even know, is that I sincerely want to have a good conversation, and I want that person to have a good conversation. And so just that sincerity, even if I don't know a lot about the topic, usually goes a long way, and people usually really appreciate that like sincere wish to have a decent conversation. Because as you know, they can be hard to come by. And sometimes, you know, like I'll feel a little bit sheepish that I don't know as much about a topic as I feel like maybe I should or could, you know, given whatever the context is. But whatever. Life is life. And living as authentically and with as much sincerity as one can muster is meaningful, is a meaningful life. Yes, yep, that absolutely open-mindedness, like being, yeah, and like really being willing to entertain not only just like that other person's perspective, but like what each of your perspectives kind of like evolves into in that conversation, like being open to entertaining like where that goes, and cultivating that in the conversation, and being playful with it, and just kind of like experimenting with like where it can go, and having a nice time, like enjoying, you know, that how that evolves. And a lot of that will come down to the mutual interest, of course, of the persons participating, and also just kind of like the chemistry of the environment, the chemistry of the subtleness of the interrelation, and anything else that goes on, you know, in the evolution of that conversational enterprise. Yeah, the open-mindedness is definitely key, because otherwise it's just not really going to go anywhere fun. It's just going to be kind of like a muddy train with scheduled stops. Yeah. Yep. And those can be painful. And then you're just like, ugh, like I'm gonna go get another glass of wine. Like, oh, look at that artwork over there. I think I'm gonna go check that out. It was so nice talking to you. Bye. Hope you have a nice time. Yeah, I think that's what I've kind of learned about myself, yeah, over the years is that, like, even when I find a conversation or a person's behavior like very distasteful or unpleasant, like I still find a way to wish them well, and, you know, cut and run or whatever it is, you know, that I need to do for me, but like to kind of like part in with like still like finding a way to wish them well and hope that they, you know, learn from whatever that exchange is and get out of it what will help them grow. And I guess I'd have to say that I'm not always that good at doing that, but I certainly try, and I try to do it like sincerely, not like in a hippy-dippy like bullshit way, because there's a lot of that going around too. Yeah. Yeah, that could, oh yeah, right. I mean, that could just be like, well, it's called being polite. Yeah, I guess that could be too. Yeah. Oh, how I long for the days of just like wandering around art galleries and just going to art openings and like having just random interesting conversations based on like artworks, other like philosophical things. I actually find that I sometimes need to work on being point blank rude. Like that would be to my benefit if I could like hone that as a mode that I can draw on when I need to. Like that would be very helpful if I could do that on, you know, on call. And I think that I kind of do that when I find that I just need to be blunt and honest and like very frank about something, which can come off as being rude, but usually it's just that I'm very like bluntly honest, and I think I would benefit if I could work on that. Yeah, I think, you know, I think it's a good thing to be able to do. Sometimes you just gotta be very to the point. Cut through the shit. Get to the bottom of it. It's a good skill. That's the takeaway. It's a good skill. Yeah. Well, I think that I'm probably going to call it a night. Thank you for being part of it and being part of the chat and really making a conversation. I do. I'm glad when people join and really make it like more of an exchange than me just like randomly going through things and talking about whatever it is that I come up with for the night, which, you know, it's kind of fun too. But this is what makes it more meaningful. So I will say that I tend to go live on Saturday nights, not earlier than 10:28, and try not to do it any later than 11:43. So usually sometime, and that's the Eastern time, New York time. So I guess it's probably, if you're in Manchester area now, it's pretty late for you or early, and so thank you for tuning in. It's, in that perspective, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate the follow. So I hope to see you next Saturday, and with a report on how Tuesday went. We'll get past next Tuesday, and I will see you next Saturday. All right. Have a good Sunday morning and a warm and cozy Sunday afternoon. and take care. All right, cheers.